3 days passed without hearing from Daniel. That worried me more than constant arguing would have. Silence usually means decisions are being made somewhere. I tried focusing on work around the farm, but my mind kept drifting toward Chicago, toward Ethan, toward the expression on Daniel's face when Vanessa drove away. Around Thursday evening, the phone finally rang. "Dad," Daniel said immediately, voice exhausted. "You busy?" No, a long pause followed. Then, quietly, "Can I come out there tonight?" My chest tightened slightly. Of course. He arrived after dark alone. The moment he stepped from the SUV, I knew something serious had happened. His tie was missing, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept properly in days. He looked less like a successful executive and more like a man surviving a collapse nobody else could see yet. Inside the farmhouse, I poured coffee while he stood silently near the kitchen table. Finally he spoke. Vanessa left. I stayed calm externally, though sadness still moved through me hearing it. Temporarily, he shook his head once. She took Ethan to her sister's place. Did she say why? Daniel laughed bitterly. Because apparently I'm becoming my father. The sentence hung heavily in the kitchen, and that's unacceptable to her. She said I've changed since the gala. He rubbed his face tiredly. Less ambitious, less focused, too emotional. I sat quietly across from him. And what do you think? He looked directly at me for the first time. I think I'm finally noticing how miserable I've been. There are moments when people stop performing versions of themselves and accidentally become honest. Daniel stood inside one of those moments now. The company offered me a choice yesterday, he continued. Public image rehabilitation program or resignation. I frowned slightly. What exactly is an image rehabilitation program? Public charity appearances, interviews, family-oriented branding. He laughed again without humor, basically pretending to be a better person for 6 months. And I resigned this morning. That genuinely surprised me. Not because quitting was impossible, because Daniel had built his entire identity around professional success for so long. Walking away from it meant something inside him truly cracked open. How do you feel? I asked carefully. He leaned back in the chair slowly. Terrified, honest answer. But also, he searched for the word. Relieved. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows while silence settled between us again. Finally, Daniel whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. I don't think Vanessa ever loved who I actually was. I considered that carefully before answering. Did you? He looked confused. What? Love who you actually were. That hit him harder than expected. He stared down at the coffee mug in his hands for a long time. I spent years trying to become someone impressive enough that nobody would ever look down on me again. And I think somewhere along the way, I started looking down on myself first. There it was, the real wound underneath everything. Shame, not of poverty itself, but of helplessness. Daniel spent his whole adult life outrunning childhood fear until he forgot why he was running. Upstairs, old pipes groaned softly through the farmhouse walls. Outside, wind moved across the dark fields. Simple sounds, honest sounds, no performance. What happens now, he finally asked. I answered truthfully. That depends on what kind of man you want to become after losing the life you built. He nodded slowly. Vanessa says I'm throwing away everything we worked for. Maybe. Do you think she's wrong? I leaned back thoughtfully. No, he looked surprised. Then why does it feel like staying would have destroyed me anyway? Because successful lives can still be unhealthy ones. He absorbed that quietly. Around midnight, we heard another vehicle approaching outside. Daniel frowned immediately. Who would come here this late? Headlights stopped near the porch. Then unexpectedly, Ethan jumped out before the engine fully died and ran toward the house. Grandpa, Daniel stood instantly. Ethan. A second later, Vanessa stepped onto the porch looking furious and exhausted at the same time. I opened the door slowly. What happened? Ethan hugged Daniel tightly, while Vanessa remained near the doorway with crossed arms. Your son turned off his phone, she said coldly. And Ethan refused to stop crying unless I brought him here. Daniel looked stunned. You drove 3 hours because Ethan was upset. No, she snapped. I drove 3 hours because I'm tired. For the first time since meeting her, Vanessa looked genuinely worn down. Not polished, not composed, just exhausted. Ethan refused to let go of Daniel. "I thought you left too," he whispered. Daniel's expression broke, slightly hearing that. "No, move." Vanessa stepped inside reluctantly, while rain continued outside. Her eyes moved around the farmhouse with visible discomfort, but underneath it now sat something. "So this is it," she muttered quietly. "You're really choosing this place?" Daniel looked at her carefully. "This place is my home too." "No," she answered immediately. "It's your past." Silence followed. Then unexpectedly, I spoke. "Sometimes those are the same thing." Vanessa looked at me sharply. "You think this is some noble awakening?" "He quit his career, Harold. Maybe he quit pretending." Her jaw tightened instantly. "Easy for you to say. You never had anything to lose." The kitchen became completely silent after that sentence. Even Ethan looked uncomfortable. Daniel stood up slowly. "Don't." But Vanessa kept going, years of frustration finally spilling out. "You think I'm shallow because I wanted a better life? Because I didn't want my son growing up scared about money every winter?" She pointed toward the farmhouse windows. "This life broke him once already." I stayed calm despite the insult because, deep down, she wasn't entirely wrong. Poverty leaves scars. "You're confusing struggle with failure," I answered quietly. "No," she shot back. "You romanticize hardship because it's all you know." Daniel suddenly slammed his hand against the kitchen counter hard enough to startle everyone. "Enough!" Silence crashed down instantly. He looked at Vanessa with genuine anger now. "Do you even hear yourself anymore?" She stared back, equally furious. "Do you?" Ethan clung tighter to Daniel's arm, frightened by the shouting. I gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Why don't we get you some pie?" He nodded silently, grateful for escape. While Ethan and I moved toward the living room, Daniel and Vanessa continued arguing quietly in the kitchen. Their voices blurred together beneath the rain. Not really discussing me anymore. Discussing years of buried resentment finally surfacing because the performance holding their marriage together had collapsed. Ethan sat beside me on the couch holding a plate of pie untouched. Are mom and dad getting divorced? Children deserve truth carefully delivered. I don't know. He looked down sadly. I wish everyone would stop being angry. That sentence settled heavily in my chest. Because anger had dominated our family for too long now. Anger hiding grief, shame, fear, disappointment. Eventually Daniel entered the living room alone. Vanessa remained outside on the porch, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. I'd never seen her smoke before. "She wants to leave tonight," he said quietly. "And Ethan, he wants to stay here." Ethan immediately nodded hard. "Please." Daniel looked exhausted beyond words. "I don't know what the right decision is anymore." For years, he always believed he knew exactly what mattered. Money, advancement, status. Now uncertainty terrified him because certainty had defined his identity. I looked toward the porch window where Vanessa stood alone beneath the rain. Then back at my son. "The right decision," I said quietly, "is usually the one allowing your child to feel safe instead of impressed." Daniel stared at me silently after that. Finally, he turned toward Ethan. "Would you like to stay the weekend with Grandpa?" Ethan's face lit up instantly. "Really?" Daniel nodded tiredly. "Yeah." Ethan hugged him fiercely. Watching them, I realized something important. Daniel wasn't becoming weak. He was becoming reachable again, human again, vulnerable enough to choose connection over appearance. And people built entirely around image often interpret humanity itself as failure. About 20 minutes later, Vanessa stepped back inside wearing her coat. Her makeup had smeared slightly from rain and tears. She clearly hoped nobody noticed. She looked at Ethan first. "You're staying?" He nodded cautiously. Then she looked at Daniel. "If you keep going down this road, there won't be anything left of our old life." Daniel answered quietly but firmly. "Maybe there shouldn't be." That sentence ended something permanently between them. I could see it immediately in her face. Vanessa stood there for several seconds staring at the man she married and realizing he no longer valued the same things. Then she looked toward me one last time. "You think you won." I shook my head slowly. "No, families aren't wars." But she no longer believed that. Without another word, She turned and walked out,